Let's head to the Midwest, Chicago, and check in with Phil Rogers, MLB.com columnist. And Phil, first off, let's talk about the weather. I know Chicago, Heidi was talking about all the snow that Boston has recently. We've had a little bit. Chicago got dumped on as well.
Well, yeah, but last winter was our Boston winter. This hasn't been nearly like what we had last year. You know, last year I think total snowfall in Chicago was over 80 inches. So I don't know what that is. That's a big poppy plus a Louisville Slugger or something.
Right, absolutely. All right, let's bring it back to baseball and talk All-Star games here. And Heidi mentioned it, that the Cincinnati's going to have the All-Star game this year, San Diego next year. So we're going to see back-to-back National League cities. And this potentially could be a trend. And Commissioner Rob Manfred, he is putting his stake here early on in his new time of being the commissioner.
Well, right, Fran. I mean, historically, the All-Star game has alternated between the leagues. There have been exceptions. This 2015, 2016 Cincinnati, San Diego is one of those exceptions. But Rob Manfred, the commissioner, has said that in the future, MLB is going to go to a process like the NFL uses with the Super Bowl, where they bid the game out. They're not as bound to the league locations. And if you look right now, there's a backload of NL cities that have been more or less promised games because of new stadiums. Philadelphia hasn't had a All-Star game since 1996. Citizens Bank Park opened in 2004. It's on that list. Miami, Washington. And then you get past that, you got a new stadium opening in Atlanta in a couple years. You've got the work that was done at Dodger Stadium, the work that is being done at Wrigley Field. And I think when you look 10 years down the road, you see the All-Star game in National League parks maybe 7 or 8, even 9 times in the next 10 years. It's going to be a different landscape for sure. And one thing I wondered, Fran, is the fairness. You know, now that you tie home field advantage to the result of the All-Star game, how fair is it to let one league bat last all the time? Maybe it doesn't really matter. Regular season, baseball, home field advantage. The home teams over the last 10 years have won 54% of the time. But there have been 12 All-Star games played awarding home field advantage. The home league has gone 5-7 in those games, so it really hadn't mattered at all.
You know, Phil, I wanted to ask you, since you're sitting there in Chicago, two of the best teams that have made some of the great moves this winter have been in Chicago, the White Sox and the Cubs. Who are some of your improved teams this postseason? Or this offseason, sorry.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I wrote about this on MLB.com yesterday, coming out of the James Shields signing. You know, obviously the Padres, and also before I get going too far, what I was looking at is just immediate talent in and talent out, how the rosters have been upgraded for 2015. San Diego, all that talent. You can quibble about down the road what they've paid in terms of draft picks that they've forfeited and prospects they've traded, but if you look at that roster, that jumps out at you. And then in Chicago, I actually went with the Cubs over the White Sox because I factor in Joe Madden and his influence, give him the big managerial hiring over John Lester. But the White Sox, you know, have overhauled that roster. They've improved their strengths. They've addressed their weaknesses. You couldn't have done much better than that. And I look at the Nationals adding Max Scherzer on top of a rotation that was probably already the best in baseball. The Blue Jays, what they did, adding 2 impact players to their lineup in Donaldson and Russell Martin. Leave Boston out, which I know is a little different than some other lists. People really like what the Red Sox have done to their lineup. And I'm with them. You know, this era when there was more pitching than hitting, they've really put together a lineup that should just mash out runs. But they also lose John Lester, big loss. So I think when you look at the most improved teams, to a big degree, it comes down to who added the top free agents, and you know you got to factor in who lost them too.
So those are some of the teams that have improved by adding some big-time players. What about your unknowns, Phil, heading into 2015?
Well, Fran, when I took a look at this, you know, if I had a crystal ball, I would want to know what is Yasmani Tomas going to mean for the Diamondbacks? Is he going to step in like Jose Abreu did, like Cespedes did, like Yasiel Puig did, and be a a guy that hits the ground running and has an all-star type season. Will he be able to play third base, or will they have to find room for him with their corner outfield, which would get tricky with Mark Trumbo out there in right field? And then also the Pittsburgh Pirates. I love this guy, Jung Ho Kang. One of my most entertaining hours this winter was when I watched a YouTube video of his 40 home runs last year in Korea. I mean, he mashes long ones to left. He hits them to center. He sneaks them just inside the right field foul pole going the opposite way. And for some reason, with the Nexon Heroes, his team in Korea, when he gets to home plate, they would give him like a little teddy bear when he crossed. So, you know, the Pirates might want to think about if they can find some stuffed animals to motivate the guy, because he really seemed to respond to that. But, you know, they don't know exactly how he fits. Will he be able to hit for power? Will he be able to stay at shortstop? I understand at the start of spring training, they're going to give him a shot at shortstop. You know, Jordy Mercer had a very good season for them last year. An amazing stat on Jordy Mercer: no throwing errors all season. Ron, how would you like that from your starting shortstop if you knew every ground ball was going to result in an out? Jordy Mercer did that last year. You don't know, Kang may hit home runs, but he's going to be up and down defensively. And the one thing I think, you hear a lot of skepticism about, you know, can he handle major league pitching? Korea's more like Double-A. But there was that same kind of talk about Jose Abreu coming from Cuba, and it was the Korean pitching pool is down, and, you know, he's not going to be able to handle the fastballs inside. And his second game last year, Ron Gardenhire intentionally walked him twice in his second game. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Kang and Yasmani Tomas hit the ground like that.
Well, let me throw a surprise out here at you, Phil. What about Alex Rodriguez?
Well, it's going to be a big story in spring training. You know, I think the Yankees are handling this right. You know, you really couldn't count on him to come back after not playing all of last year and pick up and be a regular at a position like third base. I think keeping Headley is right. The American League gives you the DH spot. There are ways to get him in the lineup. You know, if the Yankees didn't want him to go away, they could always just pay him $60 million and he would go away. There would probably be a grievance, because you know, if a player is healthy and still productive, you can't just release him to get rid of him, according to the CBA. But, you know, I think there's nothing really to do but give him a chance in spring training, see if he can help. See if he really is flexible enough to be willing to become kind of a super utility guy and a primary DH. It's going to be interesting to see, but, you know, it's an unfortunate fallout from his PED situation. And, you know, one thing to keep in mind, and I think this gets lost a little bit, the Yankees, when they did that when they paid up again after the opt-out clause, they did it because they hadn't won the World Series since 2000, and they were super motivated to win another World Series. They don't win in 09 without the job that A-Rod did alongside Jeter, alongside CC Sabathia. So he did do really the biggest thing that they asked him to do when they gave him that contract, and now they're kind of having to live with the downside of it. You see that all the time in baseball. This gets blown out because of the circumstances and the fact it's the Yankees, but just suck it up, go to spring training, see what happens.
I want to work for you, Phil. If you're going to write $60 million checks just for nothing, where can I sign up for that? So that sounds like a good work if you can get it.
Well, it's a guaranteed contract, and you know, the players' union went through a lot of strikes, went through a lot of hardship and sacrifice to get the system set up that exists today, and this is just part of it.
No doubt. Phil Rogers joining us from Chicago. Stay warm, Phil. We appreciate it.